I am really curious about just what you do, Mr. Dan Johnson, because I've been on your webpage and reading about it, and I would love to hear from your own mouth, kind of where you're coming from.
I've heard him do this before, so this is going to be fun.
So, basically, I'm the executive director of We Do Better, and wedobetter.org. And basically, the best way to understand We Do Better is to start with an example. Molly Tibbetts was on the news for a good month after she was unfortunately slain when she was jogging in Iowa. And that was on July 18th. On August 21st is when investigators finally found her. It is likely the manhunt costed a couple $1 million, if not more. It required the help of multiple news networks and many different agencies involved. And at the end of the day, when it took them over a month to find her. But there's a nonprofit organization in San Diego called Saved America. Saved in America is an organization of former Navy SEALs, law enforcement, and private investigators who assist parents and law enforcement in finding basically missing and runaway children. Since 2014, Saved in America has found over 70 children, finding them in an average of over only 9 days at a cost to them of only $5,000 per child. America doesn't pay anything, Saved in America covers the cost. And whether you look at missing children, which is something that strikes the heart of many parents, or you look at food distribution, or you look at disaster relief with the Cajun Navy, or you look at microfinancing with the Rocky Mountain Microfinancing Institute, the fact is there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of organizations across the United States that deliver better outcomes than the government. And what we do is we show people that that is the case so that they can connect with those organizations, so that they can support and work with those organizations. And secondly, we work to allow people to direct the money that's supposed to go toward helping people, their tax dollars, to those organizations. And we have 15 teams active around the country in 12 different states. We've been involved in disaster relief efforts in Puerto Rico and in Florida. And we believe that in order to change a system that is a system of meeting human needs in the US, in order to change a system, you do not attempt to change that system, but as Buckminster Fuller put it, you simply create a new system that makes the existing system obsolete. And I would say, in a nutshell, that is what we're doing.
Wow.
I like it. But I've heard the spiel before.
That's awesome. I mean,
I listened to him, I think, tell Mark Claire about the Rocky Mountain Finance thing. But
yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was on. I think it was Lions of Liberty, but...
well, Mark and I podcast. I think Mark said I'm the most prolific guest ever on Lions of Liberty. So I've been on there like 7 times.
Nice.
Yeah, at least once or twice I might have talked about Rocky Mountain Microfinance. But for those who might not be able to find that episode, just as a FYI, the Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute works to bring people out of poverty by helping them start businesses and get them going. And since 2008, they've distributed $440,000 in 182 different loans to low-income entrepreneurs. And they have a 95% repayment rate, which means 182 businesses got started in Denver and are making enough money to bring those low-income business owners and their families out of poverty.
Wow.
I mean, as a horrible capitalist, that sounds amazing to me.
To me, you know, I think for me to talk about this as well on Lions of Liberty, but I've been involved in what we broadly call politics, or, you know, poly being many and ticks being blood-sucking creatures. I've been involved in that arena for probably 7 years now, and ever since I was 18. And And the answers are not to be found there. I've done everything. I've done petitioning. I've done run multiple organizations, lawsuits, been involved with and run campaigns, all of the above. And at the end of the day, because politics, even though the aim is supposedly we're going to help this group of people or we're going to help another group of people, the fact is that the system is based on pitting those people who have resources against those people who don't, and somehow expecting that system to work out well for the least advantaged in our society. And it doesn't. There is no changing it. It is fundamentally flawed. Government is the only institution on Earth where resources don't follow results. And yes, that's a big claim, but it's true. And if we want to meet the needs in this country, and in other countries as well, we're focused here. We have to find those organizations or create them that do a better job than the government already. And we need to be able to take the money that is being wasted on various programs that aren't bringing people out of poverty, that aren't solving homelessness, that aren't solving healthcare. And we need to take that money and be able to put it toward those organizations that are doing that work.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard to argue with those examples, for sure. And I think a lot of us have kind of had those suspicions about, some of the large sort of supposedly charitable organizations, and kind of where all that money goes. So, it's, I think, super exciting to hear about organizations that actually are doing better.
So, quick question. Where do you fall on the political spectrum yourself? Obviously, I know you through libertarian stuff, but I don't want to make the assumption.
Well, for me personally, I don't speak for the organization on this, but for me personally, I grew up bomb them all in the Middle East and turn into a parking lot conservative. And I would consider myself a voluntarist now.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, we're glad to have you over on this side.
And the way I would define that philosophy, just to be clear, because there's all kinds of definitions for it. The way I would define that philosophy is, you guys ever heard of Machinery of Freedom, the book?
No.
Okay. So David Friedman, who is the son of Milton Friedman,
okay,
he wrote a book called The Machinery of Freedom.
Okay.
And in that book, he lays out what I believe is an accurate assessment of the three categories of human interaction. The first category is love. Love is when I give you something not expecting anything in return. I may get something in return, that may happen, but I'm giving of myself to you, whether it's a hug or whether it's something material, something immaterial. That love is when I give you something and don't expect anything in return. And then there's trade. Trade is when I give you something and expect something in return. So I might sell you something. I might give you something expecting you to give me something later. That is trade. And both love and trade are win-win for both people involved. Shakespeare said that giving is twice blessed because of the good feeling that you get, the whole feeling that you get when you give to someone. And trade, obviously, benefits both people involved, and both come out better off. And then the third category of human interaction is force. Sometimes force is necessary. Such as self-defense. You may need force to defend yourself against force. However, force is the only type of human interaction where both people do not win. It is the only type of human interaction where it is guaranteed that one of the people in that interaction comes away worse off. And to me, voluntarism means that we move as many of our human interactions out of force and into trade or into love. So that is how I would define my political philosophy.
So we've got a neocon turned straight up hippie. I didn't think it was possible, folks, but apparently that's where we're at. That's the world we live in.
Nice. I gotta read that book. That sounds
Yeah,
very
Friedman's
interesting.
good. I'd never actually heard of what he wrote. So like I'm an ANCAP, and my I haven't read very much because I've never had anybody explain something to me that didn't make sense and feel it necessary. I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. So okay. When it stops making sense, I'll start reading some more books on it. But
It's fair.
I'm curious, how do you make that transition? How do you find yourself away from, gun-loving sheet of glass to, hey, we need to be as peaceful and as little of this force thing as possible?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll keep it at least somewhat short, given the length of the podcast.
Yeah, I said condense it down if you could. I want to talk about music, so let's get there.
So, right, absolutely. So, I think at the end of the day, it started. I had a traumatic incident where the state did not intervene, and I expected them to. I expected the authority to come in and rescue me. I was shot at in my own home, and by home invaders, and
Oh, no, that ends.
basically they came up the stairs and opened my bedroom door, and thankfully neither me nor them got hurt. And I used a knife and chased them down the hallway and things like that. But they did shoot at me, and they missed by probably a couple inches. And I watched the bullet fly toward me.
They say never bring a knife to a gunfight. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize it was a gunfight, and they were in my house, and I wasn't going to chase them down with a...
Yeah, you don't anticipate that there.
Nah. Really? You don't sleep with both eyes open?
Well, maybe now he does.
I do.
Good Lord, man.
Liz will vouch for this. I do sleep very creepily with both eyes open.
Well, sometimes I do now. Anyway, so I chased them out of the house, and there's broken glass everywhere, and I call 911. And it was funny, I called 911, and then I went over to my neighbor's house because I didn't feel safe at my own house. Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah.
And when I walked over to my neighbor's, imagine you're my neighbor. I show up shirtless and with only like part of my jeans on, because I had big holes in my jeans that I decided to put on, so I put my legs through the holes instead of down through the bottom.
I like this.
And I'm holding a giant throwing knife in a low ready position, and my neighbors don't know me very well. So I show up at their door, and for some reason they listened to me and let me in. I called the police, and we waited. And we waited. And we waited. There's a police department a mile, maybe in a mile and a half from my parents' house where this happened. And they weren't there. And they weren't there, and they weren't there. And it must have been 15 minutes later that no lights on, a police car comes rolling down the street, and the lady gets out, and she looks like she just got back from multiple Dunkin' Donuts runs.
Oh, jeez.
And I remember thinking, so everybody told me, and everybody afterward told me, well, you should have called 911.
Yeah.
If I had relied on 911, I'd be tied up, and all my stuff would be gone, or I'd be dead. And I just had that experience where it was like I was brought up, respect authority, respect authority, respect authority. They'll protect you, they'll protect you, they'll protect you. And then I had that experience where they didn't. And I think what it did was it opened my mind. And I know a lot, you'll talk to a lot of people who are in activism, so to speak. We'll talk about encounters with police or encounters with a government agency or some sort of authority. It's like if you're brought up to believe in that, you almost have to experience for yourself either somebody doing a better job than them or them just completely failing. But once I got that, it opened my mind a little bit. I became aware of things around me and open to other ideas. And then over time, I got involved in the Ron Paul movement. That was an exciting time, and we did a lot of stuff. And then I got involved in civil liberties action. And at the end of the day, for me, morality is about consistency. I was brought up to be a moral and a good person, that your integrity is paramount. And I have a friend of mine who went around his town in Massachusetts, and he went around with a picture of a man with a gun. And he would ask people, is this okay if this guy comes up and robs you? And they're like, well, no. And then he would add black boots. And he was like, is this okay if this guy comes up and robs you? And they're like, well, no. And then he would add a black uniform. So is this okay if this guy comes up and robs you? And he was trying to see at what piece of clothing does this person have to put on in order to go from this is wrong to this is no longer wrong because somebody said so.
Wow.
And to me, that is what makes me a voluntarist at the end of the day is either I believe it is wrong to steal or I don't. I can't believe it's wrong to steal and then, oh, well, these people can steal. That's fine because everybody else agrees they can. That's not how this works. Morals are not agreed upon group ideals. They are either you believe in a particular action or you have relative morality, and I don't know if I can trust people who have relative morality. So I realized at the end of the day, I could not live with myself if I was supporting something, aka government, that was inherently violating people's rights. Like it doesn't exist without violating people's rights. It has to take money from people to exist without their consent, essentially. So if you ever seen the Larkin Rose video on what if you were king, what happens if the king no longer tells people that I'm going to take your money? Well, they stop paying for his castle. Yeah. And they're like, well, why are we doing this then? Like it has to exist only through violating people's rights. And that's just not a trade-off that I'm willing to make in morals. Either stealing is wrong or it's not. And so at the end of the day, that's what makes me a voluntarist is I believe every single person, regardless of their job title, regardless of their background, race, creed, religion, etc., I believe every single person should be held to the same moral standard. And just because a bunch of people get together and say, well, we all like it when they're not, doesn't mean that I'm okay with that. And I think that voluntarism is the only consistent, and it might be arrogant to say this, but it is the only consistent moral philosophy. And that's why I'm